It's a great time to watch anime. There are just so many good shows to watch at the moment. The Promised Neverland, Mob Psycho 100, Fairy Gone, One Piece, My Hero Academia. Yet, during this past week, I decided to go back and give Black Clover a second chance after dropping the series years ago. I originally started watching Black Clover when it started airing on Toonami back in 2017. At the time, there was a lot of negativity surrounding the series due to its main character Asta being so noisy and the story structure being too similar to the original Naruto series by Masashi Kishimoto. After the first episode aired, I did a first impressions video in which I stated I was optimistic about the potential of the series, but I felt as though the show was following the formula laid down by Naruto too much. The first episode seemed like creator Yuki Tabata was too afraid to innovate on the story structure of Kishimoto's popular series. I praised the humor in the first episode and gave the voice acting a pass given what I heard about the Japanese subbed version. After the initial Toonami premiere, I watched the next 3 episodes and then stopped watching it. I stopped watching it simply because I didn't want to wait each week to see what happened next. I wanted to give the series time to develop and hopefully do its own thing. I've recently watched the entire first season from the beginning. Season 1 is 51 episodes and to my surprise it doesn't contain a lot of filler. The first 17 episodes leave a terrible first impression overall. Tabata was clearly inspired by Naruto and Hiro Mishima's Fairy Tail series and wanted to emulate them with Black Clover. There obviously isn't anything wrong with an author taking inspiration from someone else's work. However, it's the author's responsibility to deviate from the established norms of the genre when possible, or at the very least, refine or expand on the ideas and themes presented in the work that they're influenced by. It seems like Tabata used the beginning of Naruto as a template for Black Clover's first 11 episodes, but didn't change elements of the story enough, and as a result, the show comes off as a shameless Naruto clone at first. For those unfamiliar with the story of Black Clover, it centers on the lives of 2 orphans named Asta and Yuno that are taken in by a nearby church in a small village on the outskirts of Clover Kingdom. They grew up hearing stories about how the first Wizard King defeated a powerful demon and aspired to become the next Wizard King. Yuno is naturally skilled using magic, whereas Asta can't use magic at all, which is highly unusual in this world. Asta and Yuno eventually obtain grimoires and join a Magic Knight squad so that they can one day achieve their dream. Tabata tries to capture the feeling of early Naruto and the dysfunctional family dynamic of Fairy Tail's titular guild within the first 6 episodes, but fails miserably. One major issue in the beginning is that the majority of characters introduced are unlikable and uninteresting. Asta is one of the worst main characters ever conceived for an anime in this genre. I thought that people were exaggerating about him being loud and obnoxious. It's almost like Tabata took the worst parts of Naruto as a teenager in Naruto Part 1 and made sure to adhere to just about every character trope for a main character in this genre. Asta spends the first 6 episodes of the show screaming and repeating the same lines of dialogue like a broken record. I'm gonna be the Wizard King! I'm not done yet! I swear he says that line about becoming Wizard King over a dozen times in the 3rd episode. This character has the most repetitive dialogue out of anyone in the series so far. It's obvious that Tabata realizes how annoying the character can be because there are several scenes where his Black Bull squad mates tell him to shut up, but simply acknowledging it a few times isn't enough to just ignore the problem. There is one scene where Asta and another character are simply talking about something and then all of a sudden he starts shouting about how he's gonna become Wizard King one day. There are scenes where Asta might be doing something mundane like washing clothes for example, and he'll start yelling and spouting the same tired dialogue. I'm not done yet! Eventually, this becomes Asta's catchphrase, similar to Naruto saying believe it, or Natsu saying I'm all fired up. This was one aspect of early Naruto that I remember a lot of people hating. It didn't bother me much at the time, but my tolerance for repetitive dialogue and pointless screaming has plummeted now that I'm older. Aside from Asta's irritating personality, the character is simply hard to get invested into because of how uninteresting Tabata made him. I feel like the creator misunderstood why Naruto's underdog story worked, and what made that character so endearing for so many people. Naruto was only being loud and obnoxious in the beginning simply because he wanted the attention from the villagers that shunned him due to the nine-tailed fox being sealed inside of him. When Iruka rescues him in the first episode of the series, he finally felt like someone actually cared for him. His original motivation for becoming the Hokage was so that everyone in the village would be forced to acknowledge him, but this changed as the story progressed. Naruto was labeled a failure and a loser by his peers at first, but eventually gained friends and was recognized as a formidable shinobi. He went from a lonely, abandoned orphan to someone loved by the entire village and who has friends that cherish him. Kishimoto stressed how miserable and isolated Naruto was before he finally graduated from the academy and made friends through the use of many flashbacks throughout the series. Although one could argue that Kishimoto overused flashbacks in the original Naruto, they helped to reinforce and elevate the emotional and physical struggle of Naruto and many other characters. Tabata gives us a surface level reinterpretation of Naruto that is severely lacking in characterization. Similar to Naruto, many people doubt that Asta will make it as a magic knight, let alone become a wizard king, given the fact that he can't use magic. Throughout the season, Asta influences many characters through his overwhelming determination and makes new friends. Again, much like Naruto, Asta and Yuno want to become Wizard King to prove that anyone could rise to the position despite their socio-economic status and to give their family at the church a better life, which is a decent motivation for both characters. So what is missing from Tabata's character? Well, fans became invested in Naruto not simply because of his drive to succeed, but because the show gave viewers a reason to be emotionally invested in the character. Kishimoto made a sympathetic, relatable character that not only had to deal with the prejudice of people in his village and the depression that comes along with that loneliness, but often had to challenge the ideology of the people he met, like Neji, in the Chunin exams. We're shown the hardships that Naruto has to face beforehand, so it's easy to root for him when he defeats characters like Gaara, or be concerned for him when things look grim. Asta simply lacks character depth, and the way that Tabata lazily wrote the first half of the story certainly doesn't help. We only get to see a few glimpses of Asta and Yuno's childhood within the first season. The second episode shows where Asta protects Yuno from a drunken guy trying to steal his necklace, and how that night changed Yuno. Yuno was inspired by Asta's resolve throughout their childhood, and they both make a promise to fight to see who will become the next Wizard King. We're never really given a reason to care about these characters on an emotional level or gain a deeper insight into their character. The most we get from their childhood flashbacks throughout the series is very basic stuff, such as wanting to protect their family, gain new friends, and how they will continue to strive toward their dream despite whatever obstacles are in their way. It is painfully obvious that Tabata didn't know how to set his characters up in a unique and clever way. I mentioned in my first impressions video for the premiere episode that Asta and Yuno's relationship kind of reminded me of Itachi and Sasuke when they were growing up. Tabata wanted to quickly establish Asta and Yuno as rivals in the same vein as characters like Naruto and Sasuke, Goku and Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, or Deku and Kacchan from My Hero Academia. Unfortunately, Tabata does this through heavy-handed dialogue that shows just how inept he is when it comes to setting up certain relationships between characters. Instead of having two characters say that they're rivals, why not simply show it and let it happen organically over time? Tabata makes the same mistake when it comes to establishing the status quo for the world of Black Clover. Instead of having characters say that magic is everything, why don't you just show it instead? Simply repeating something over and over isn't always the most effective way at getting your point across. Anyway, at least Yuno is a more nuanced character in comparison to Asta. He doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve, and he's way more relaxed. Episodes 12 and 13 focused on him and his Golden Dawn squad mates, Mimosa and Klaus, being assigned to protect someone of royalty. These episodes were far more tolerable than those featuring the Black Bulls in the beginning, and were a welcome change of pace from the unnecessarily loud and overly energetic Asta. I hated most of the Black Bull squad the moment the show introduced them. The Black Bulls are supposed to be a group of misfit magic knights that most people don't want to join. They're essentially the black sheep among the 9 magic knight squads. After Captain Yami is introduced and Asta decides to join the squad, he takes him back to the squad's home. The first scene in which we're introduced to the Black Bulls, Magna is screaming at Luck and tearing up the place using his fire magic, while other members of the squad are doing their own thing. This gleeful scene where Magna and Luck wreck the house was clearly inspired by Fairy Tail. Magna's yelling in this scene made me swell up with dread. Oh great, another obnoxious character, just what we need. That whole scene felt unoriginal, and everyone outside of Captain Yami, Luck, Magna, and Noel feel like comic relief or gag characters. It certainly doesn't help that Tabata ripped off Fairy Tail's Elfman Sprouse and has Magna spout crap to Asta about being a real man several times at the start of the season. I hated him and the weird sister-loving Ghosh the most. Throughout the first 17 episodes, the only characters within the Black Bull squad that I actually liked were Luck, Captain Yami, and Noel. I like Luck's disturbingly jolly personality and how he's always ready to fight. I'll admit that part of the reason I like Captain Yami is because of Christopher Sabat's voice work. One of my favorite characters, and perhaps one of the most complex characters within the first season, is Noel Silva. She is one of the best characters in the series. Her backstory and conflict serve to reinforce one of the series' core themes involving the social-economic class system that Tabata created. I'll elaborate more on her character later. As I stated earlier, the first 17 episodes of Season 1 are nothing special, and I can't blame anyone for dismissing the show as a Naruto clone. The first two story arcs encompass the first 19 episodes. The first arc spans 13 episodes, in which episode 9 and 10 focus on Asta and Noel's first mission, where they're sent to kill some boars, but they end up having to save a village from mysterious mages that are after a magic stone. Tabata basically ripped off the Land of Waves arc in Naruto. Asta, Magna, and Noel have to fight against mages that can use ice attacks and create mist. This is exactly what Haku and Zabuza did while fighting against Team 7. Asta and Magna even do a team attack that tricks the leader of the wizard group named Heath, and it plays out similar to how Sasuke throws the Demon Wind Shuriken clone with Naruto transformed. Nevertheless, I'll give Tabata credit for the fact that Noel learns a new skill and uses it to protect the villagers, while Sakura didn't really do anything. He also introduces the Clover Kingdom's 3 regions, which are basically separated by social class. The second story arc, the Dungeon Exploration arc, is more original and is where Tabata starts to introduce new lore and does a little world building. There are magic dungeons that appear at random, and they usually contain valuable items or powerful magic. Asta, Noel, and Luck are assigned a mission to explore the new dungeon and ensure that the Diamond Kingdom doesn't get their hands on any powerful magic or items. Yuno, Mimosa, and Klaus from the Golden Dawn squad have also been given the same task. The Diamond Kingdom sends their own wizards, Lotus and Mars, to the dungeon with the same objective. I like the design of the dungeon and the idea that these areas appear at random instead of always being accessible from a fixed location. Throughout this arc, we get flashbacks for Luck and Mars that depict their childhood. People were always afraid of Luck because of how strong he was and because of his cheerful personality. The flashbacks are brief and don't go into a lot of detail, but it appears his mother used to hate him until he defeated a noble. Luck continues to seek the approval of his mother even after her death by winning fights. She tells Luck that he can't depend on anyone else, which he learns isn't the case when Asta and Noel help him defeat Lotus. Tabata definitely used Kishimoto's backstory for Gaara as inspiration for Luck's backstory, but it does explain why he's always eager to fight. Mars was experimented on and was forced to fight to the death against other children in the Diamond Kingdom. His flashbacks show him defeating his friend Fauna, who he believes is dead. His grimoire and embedded magical stones amplify his magical power and allow him to use mineral and fire healing magic. Mars believes that the weak deserves to die, but after being defeated at the end of the arc, his mindset changes when Lotus rescues him when the dungeon starts to collapse. I can appreciate the fact that Tabata decided to not have Asta be the sole reason for the character growing, but one of his comrades instead. Overall, I thought that this story arc had a few issues, but the last 2 episodes wrapped things up pretty nicely. One thing that bothered me was when Asta tells Luck that they're friends. In the same episode, there is a flashback to Asta talking to Yuno when they were younger. Asta tells Yuno that despite not being related by blood, that he and the people at the church are family, and the same goes for any friends that they meet later on in life. Remember earlier when I said that Tabata was trying to capture the dysfunctional family dynamic in Fairy Tail? Well, this scene is a lazy way of trying to form a familial bond between Asta and not only Luck, but the rest of the Black Bulls. In other words, Tabata tried to pull a Fast and Furious, but it doesn't work here because it's done prematurely. The dungeon mission is the most time that Asta and Noel have really spent with Luck at this point in the series. These characters aren't even close friends at this point in the story. There hasn't been any moment between Luck and Noel or Luck and Asta that has really brought these characters closer together. It just feels forced, and honestly this could have worked later on in the Seabed Tempo Ark where the Black Bulls have to fight together and depend on each other. The last 2 episodes of the arc do a great job at setting up mysteries in regards to Asta's new sword ability and the wind spirit that Yuno obtains. The final few minutes of episode 19 was a good way to conclude this story arc. Klaus gets some much needed character development as he realizes that he was wrong for looking down on Asta and Yuno because of their status as commoners. Up until this point, I wasn't really a big fan of him, so I was happy to see this, and I honestly didn't see it coming. Then, the last scenes of the arc end with some great comedy relief between Noel and Asta. By the end of the dungeon exploration arc, this show was sitting at a score of 5 or 6 out of 10 for me. At that point, the series is slightly below average. Thankfully, after that story arc, the show continued to improve throughout the rest of the season. Tabata began honing in on the central theme of the series, introducing intriguing characters and developing existing ones that were previously papered thin. Although Asta still yells a lot, he gradually becomes less annoying and the dialogue is in general less repetitive. Black Clover truly hits its stride the moment the Royal Capital arc starts, which follows immediately after the dungeon exploration arc. In the first episode of this arc, the Wizard King Julius invites Asta, Klaus, Noel, Mimosa, and Yuno to the decoration ceremony where new ranks are awarded to Magic Knights. After the ceremony, a reception is held where the nobles and royals begin to stir up trouble. The nobles and royals at the ceremony look at Asta and Yuno with contempt, saying that they don't deserve to be in the capital because they're commoners from the Forsaken Realm, which is essentially the poor part of Clover Kingdom. Among the attendees are Noel's siblings that hate her and blame her for their mother's death. They also view her as a failure because she cannot control her magical power. Her brother Nozel comes up to her, pours his drink on her head, and tells her that she doesn't belong in the capital. As Noel begins to walk out, Asta stops her, stands up on a table, and calls the nobles and royals out, proclaiming that he'll become the next Wizard King. The scene I just described was one of the best in the first season, and it was the first time that Tabata successfully captured the essence of the original Naruto. There was so much tension building in that scene and emotion from both Noel and Asta. There were so many small moments in the scene that came together to make it memorable, such as when Asta grabs Noel and tells her that she doesn't have to leave. This means a lot to Noel given the fact that she has been basically banished from the inner circle of the upper class and is seen as an embarrassment among all of the royal families. It was also great seeing Asta stand up against the upper class, and Tabata makes the cliche of the overeating main protagonist actually meaningful in the context of the scenes leading up to Asta defending himself. I loved how nonchalant he is while scarfing down food while the nobles and royals scoff at him. This was one of the few times where Asta shouting and declaring that he'll become Wizard King was actually a powerful statement. I also want to take the time to praise Tabata for his characterization of Noel and how he tackles the social class theme throughout the rest of the season. Noel is much more than just a better version of Kishimoto's Sakura. Throughout the season, she struggles to learn how to control her water magic and lacks self-confidence due to her siblings' constant taunting. At first, Noel tries to hide behind her social status and arrogant attitude, but she really just wants to be accepted by the people around her. This is why Asta acknowledging how powerful she is and the rest of the Black Bulls accepting her despite her flaws is important. Noel eventually gains the confidence to control her overwhelming magical power through the advice of several key characters throughout the season. Black Bull Captain Yami, Crimson Lion Captain Fuegoleon Vermilion, and Kahano from the Seabed Temple. Tabata does a better job utilizing Noel than Kishimoto did with Sakura. Noel isn't tossed aside and forgotten, but rather used in a variety of ways. The character is used to not only emphasize the themes of acceptance and social economic class, but for comedy relief and advancing the story. Unlike Kishimoto's character Sakura, Noel has a significant role in parts of the overall story and several moments where she has to overcome her control issue in order to protect people and complete a mission. The character develops gradually, and the inner and external conflict Tabata provides for the character is relatable and provides another layer of depth that Kishimoto's infamous character lacks. He also handles Noel's developing crush on Asta in a way that feels more organic than what Kishimoto did with Sakura liking Sasuke. In fact, the character is written in such a way that it's entertaining and funny to see her wrestle with her feelings for Asta. The beach episode was surprisingly funny, and it's totally justified why she would start to like Asta. Anyways, as I stated before, Tabata deserves credit for how well he handles the themes presented in Black Clover. In the show, there's this preconceived notion that magical power is relative to the social status of an individual. In other words, the upper class are usually born with a lot of magical power, hence, are naturally some of the strongest wizards. The lower a person's socioeconomic status is, the weaker and less talented the person is assumed to be. This narrow-minded ignorance is what many people of nobility and royalty believe in Clover Kingdom throughout the first season. Additionally, Clover Kingdom is broken down into 3 regions: the Forsaken Realm, the Common Realm, and the Noble Realm. The Forsaken Realm, as I mentioned before, is where the poor reside on the outskirts of the kingdom. This is where the village that Asta and Yuno are from is located. The Common Realm is where the citizenry live. The Noble Realm is where the nobility and royalty live, as well as the location of the royal capital. It's clear what Tabata's trying to convey with how Clover Kingdom is structured, and the common misconception that is propagated throughout the country. Many people from the upper class are prejudiced toward those that are from the Forsaken Realm, and believe that they are superior to them. Since the Forsaken Realm is located on the outskirts of Clover Kingdom, some people from the upper class view them as outsiders. When people from the Noble Realm with this perspective witness Asta and Yuno do something incredible, it challenges their perception of the lower class and what they're capable of. Despite seeing what Asta and Yuno can do, characters like Nozel will hold on to the notion that the lower class are weaker and lesser than they are by default. On the other hand, fighting alongside Asta and Yuno caused Klaus to reevaluate how he interacts with and views the lower class. These characters illustrate the underlying message of Black Clover, which is to not let your circumstances dictate what you can do, and to not belittle others because of what they can't do. The last thing I want to mention before I talk about the soundtrack and the animation is the Seabed Tempo Ark. This was the final story arc within the first season and closes the season on a high note. Wizard King Julius gives the Black Bulls a mission to retrieve a stone located within an underwater temple. In order to get there, the Black Bulls must rely on Noel to transport them safely underwater, and Asta must use his sword to break through a barrier. Once they arrive at the temple, they discover the people living there, and the High Priest challenges them to a battle royale which gets interrupted by Veto of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. I really enjoyed this arc from start to finish. The scenes where the Black Bulls were traveling underwater and then eventually discovered the people living there reminded me a lot of One Piece. What I love the most about this arc, and why I think it's the best in Season 1, is the fact that the Black Bulls had to work together to defeat Veto, which is one of the strongest members in the Eye of Midnight Sun. This story arc fleshed out characters like Finral and Vanessa by providing flashbacks of their life and allowed them to grow while fighting alongside Asta. Even characters I hated like Ghosh and Magna had their moments where they had to fight alongside other members of the squad. At this point, Ghosh has learned to trust his squad mates, and it was nice seeing him actually not being selfish and work together with Charmy and Gray. This story arc really brought the Black Bulls together and built camaraderie among the members. Noel finally gets a handle on her magic and learns an attack spell to protect the squad from Veto when everyone around her was down. The support of her squad mates and her new friend Kahano allowed her to finally control her water magic. Overall, this story arc was great and was definitely needed to help build a stronger relationship among the Black Bulls and further their character development. The last 2 aspects I want to cover briefly before I close out this video are the animation and soundtrack. The animation in general is great, not quite on the level of shows like Attack on Titan, Sword Art Online, My Hero Academia, or Mob Psycho 100, but definitely not as bad as Fairy Tail or the beginning of Dragon Ball Super. The rare occasion where the animation looks bad is usually in the slower paced scenes where characters were delivering dialogue. There were several poorly animated scenes in episode 45 that stood out where characters were talking. Besides those instances though, the animation is at its best during the big fights that happen near the climax of each arc. Fights such as Yami vs. Licht, Luck vs. Veto, Asta, Finral, and Vanessa vs. Veto were animated really well and stood out the most for me. Black Clover's soundtrack, on the other hand, is largely forgettable with the exception of the first, third, and fourth opening song. The music playing throughout the show is kinda bland and uninspired. However, the third and fourth opening songs are great and the animation is top notch. The fourth opening song, Guess Who's Back, is fantastic and is one of the best openings for an anime this decade. I wasn't a big fan of the first two opening sequences. The animated scenes in the first couple of openings were standard fare and didn't really impress me, but the music in the first opening eventually grew on me. Overall, Black Clover's first season starts out a bit rough but ended on a high note that properly sets up a second season. It starts out feeling very derivative of other popular shonen series, but gradually improves and evolves into a unique take on the Naruto formula. The only issues I see holding this series back is the obnoxious protagonist Asta, repetitive and sometimes cheesy dialogue, and the occasional bad piece of animation. If I had to give this season a score, I'd probably give it a 7.5 out of 10. Next season is probably going to be an 8 for me, and it could even rise to a 9. This show has definitely improved, and if you're one of those people that dropped this show early on, I highly suggest that you go back to it and give it another shot. Thank you guys for listening. I'm out of here. Peace.